Welcome back again. And today in this video, I'm going to discuss about the types of clusters. A cluster is basically a collection of virtual machines. In a cluster, there is usually a driver node and the worker nodes. And this driver node which orchestrate the tasks performed by one or more worker nodes. And the cluster allows us to treat this group of computers as a single computer and through the driver node. This Databricks cluster enables us to run different types of workloads such as ETL for data engineering and data science and the machine learning workloads. So here Databricks offers two types of clusters. Let's take a look into them. First, all-purpose cluster and the second one is job cluster. The first one is all-purpose cluster, which is created manually. How it will create? It will create manually via the graphical user interface and the CLI or the API. Whereas the job cluster is created to and these job clusters are created when the job is going to start and to execute, and the job has been configured to use a job cluster. Okay, and coming to this all purpose cluster, which is these all purpose clusters are persistent. They can be terminated and restarted at any point of time, whereas the job clusters are terminated at the end of the job. They can be restarted, so they are no longer unable to use. So once the job has been completed, we can't restart this cluster. Okay, this job cluster. And coming to this all purpose cluster, this all purpose clusters are suitable for interactive and ad hoc analysis and workloads. And on other hand, the job clusters which are more suitable for automated workloads such as running an ETL pipeline or machine learning workflow, or this all things will happen at the regular interval of time. And coming to the all purpose cluster, all purpose clusters can be shared among many users. You can share in between two or more than two users, and they are good for collaborative analysis, whereas the job clusters are isolated just for the job to execute. So it will check whether the job is executed or not. Then for this purpose only the job cluster will be useful. And all purpose clusters are expensive to run compared to the job cluster. In a summary, all purpose clusters are great for all these things like repeated production workloads. Now that we understand the cluster types, till now we discussed about the types of clusters, and we got to know about the difference between the two types of clusters. Now let's switch over to the Databricks workspace where we can create the clusters. And to create a cluster, here in the sidebar there is a compute button to create the workspace. When you switch over to this, you will get different types of options. So far we are getting these two options only, and which is all purpose compute, and one is the job compute. Further we have another two options, and here there will be a cluster pool. In that cluster pool gives you the ability to set aside some ready to use compute capacity, so that when you want to create an all purpose cluster, you can create it quickly. That is what the use of cluster pool. Okay, and usually when you create a cluster, it will take up to 5 to 6 minutes to spin up the cluster in order to speed up the time. You can have a pool of resources waiting for you via the cluster pool. So that where the cluster pool comes into the picture. Okay, and now when you are creating a cluster, there is a ton of configuration options to specify the cluster policy, and that will helps us to pre-configure some of these details. So uh, creating a cluster becomes a simpler, and also it helps to restrict the maximum size of the cluster being created to keep the cost under control. And again, we'll talk about this in detail in the next couple of lessons, but let me go back to the all purpose cluster. And as we said before, all purpose cluster creates manually, and we do that by clicking the create compute button. Here the create compute button is there, so we can create a cluster by clicking on this create compute button. We can specify that required configurations as well. I will show you how to create. So here you can do like how to create, just I'm showing. So when you are going to create, let me create a cl tree. So this is how we can create, and we can add the configuration details as well. So let me go back to this, because here I'm not going to discuss about how to create and all. But so now let's navigate to the job compute. Okay, the job compute, as you can see, the job compute is missing the create button here. Like in all purpose compute, we can have a create button, but now we are missing the create button, because that's because the job cluster can't be created manually. So the job clusters are created when the job starts to run, and it is destroyed as soon as the job completes. You can create a Databricks jobs as a part of workflow by selecting the workflow icon. Okay, so when you are going to select the workflow icon, this is, so here it is the workflow icon, and here it is there. And as you can see, you can create jobs and the job cluster by selecting the uh, new job cluster menu. This is the new job cluster. So for example, here it is, there is a notebook and table. Here the new job cluster menu will be there. From here you can create a cluster name. As I said, the cluster will be created when the job runs and destroyed as soon as it completes. So this is what I want to discuss so far. I think today you understood what is the difference between all purpose cluster and the job cluster clearly. I have shown you with an example. So let me switch over to the next upcoming lessons in the upcoming videos. Thank you.